Vatican sitting on time machine. The machine in question is called a Chronovisor. Was built in the 1950s by a Benedictine monk named Father Pellegrino Ernetti. No photos of the Chronovisor even exist, but paranormal journalist John Chambers says Ernetti reportedly used the Wayback Machine, that's in quotes, Wayback Machine, to film Christ's crucifixion for Vatican officials. Ernetti died in 1994, it is, without revealing the secret of the Chronovisor, but Chambers says evidence is mounting that the Catholic Church is hiding a working model from the rest of the world, supposedly to keep it from getting into evil hands. Sound crazy? Maybe. But then again, there may be something to it. Chambers says a Jesuit priest named Father Francois Brunet, I don't know if that's right, believes the Chronovisor must exist because, in the priest's words, quote, Ernetti wouldn't lie about such things, end quote. Then a follow-up to that story, as follows. The Benedictine father, Marcello Pellegrini Ernetti, died in 1997, invented a method of recovering sound waves from the past and converting them into visual and acoustic reconstruction of history. Father Ernetti, a professor at the Venetian Bendito Marcello Conservatory and Foundation, I'm slaughtering all of this, I'm sure, accomplished his research in collaboration with 12 physicists who remain anonymous. In 1956, Father Ernetti began to investigate the possibility of reviewing the past with a television-like device. This clears it up a little bit, maybe. In 1957, he began collaborating with the Portuguese professor de Matos, who was researching the same problem. Ernetti's theoretical approach was based on Aristotle's concept of the disintegration of sound, according to which light and sound waves do not disappear after being produced, but are rather transformed in some way and remain present indefinitely. According to Ernetti, sound waves subdivide into harmonics and can be recovered with appropriate instruments. Ernetti stated that every human being traces from birth to death a double furrow of light and sounds. This constitutes his individual identity mark. The same applies to an event, to music, to movement. The antennas used in our laboratory enable us to tune into these furrows of pictures or sound. Ernetti recovered photographs of events such as, it's claimed, the Crucifixion of Christ, and reconstructed acoustic events such as Quintus Innis Tragedy, the original Latin from a performance in 169 BC. He also claimed to have recovered the original text of the Ten Commandments given to Moses. Oh my gosh, can you imagine that? He refused to reveal any details of his invention, and it has been thoroughly suppressed by the Italian government. Father Ernetti warned that the machine can produce universal tragedy. That should give you something to think about. So this reporter, we found this reporter, Mr. Chambers. John Chambers is translator and commentator of Conversations with Eternity. He has an M.A. in English and studied at the University of Paris. I love Paris. My wife and I love Paris. God, that's a beautiful city. His the French, that's different, but Paris, His previous translations include Phase 1, CEQ Manifesto. He's been a full-time instructor in English at Dawson College, Montreal, an assistant editor at McGraw-Hill Publishing, and managing editor at International Thompson Publishing, both in New York. He's written numerous articles on the paranormal. John is the publisher of New Paradigm Books, who brought out the book Father Ernetti's Chronovisor. The creation and disappearance of the world's first time machine. Let me repeat the name of that book, all right? Father Ernetti's Chronovisor, the creation and disappearance of the world's first time machine. Here is John Chambers. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Harold. I'm glad you found me.
I began to get these rather obscure stories about this, and I have this incredible romance with time travel, and I went, oh my God, could the Vatican... I mean, the Vatican, number one, they have a lot of secrets. They keep all kinds of things secret, John. They've got this whole area below the Vatican full of secrets, tunnels under the Vatican, and they've got the third secret of Fatima that I don't believe they've still told us the real truth about, the whole truth. They've got power. They've got telescopes in Arizona. They went zooming by all this ecological problem that anybody else would have to get a telescope. And the Vatican is fascinating. And so when I saw this story connected to a time machine in the Vatican, it about drove me nuts. And I started to do some research, and we found you. So how did you get involved with all of this?
It's kind of a long story, Art. Let me think. Sort of as a journalist, I went up to a Erich von Däniken Chariots of the Gods conference in Orlando, Florida, in 1997, just because I covered that kind of thing.
Right.
And I expected that the speakers would be, rather elderly people of von Däniken's generation. I was fascinated by the subject, of course. I got up there, and there were a whole bunch of young, brilliant speakers, half from America, the other half from Germany, mostly Germany and Switzerland. A fellow named Peter Krasse got up from Austria and gave a talk about Father Ernetti's Chronovisor. And Peter had just published a book on Father Ernetti's Chronovisor. I had never heard of this before. And at that time I was starting a publishing company, and it occurred to me that maybe I should buy the rights to this book and translate it into English. It was an astonishing subject.
Well, then it hit you exactly the way it did me. I went, oh my God, this really could be true. And if the Vatican really did have such thing, what would they do with it? You bet. Exactly what it is said here they allegedly did.
Well, it's, Ernetti, I'm sort of repeating here what's in Peter's book, and then we did a lot of research on our own and added sections and so on. Ernetti was a Benedictine monk, Italian,
yes.
Very, very brilliant man, became an expert, very early on became an expert on what's called polyphonic music. That's music that was composed from about 2000 BC to 1000 AD. Ernetti wrote a whole mess of books on the subject, also called archaic music. He was the world authority on Gregorian chant. He held the only chair in the world on polyphonic music.
Okay, well, that all sounds like various forms of altered states to me.
Well, you've got a big point there. But the thing is, the first thing about his holding this chair, I think, is suggests that this is a considerable man. He's a very, very learned, substantial fellow.
Right.
It's a little hard to dismiss him as a flake. That's one of the things that got me very quickly. And secondly, yes, it's true that when you get, I understand that when you get back into ancient Greek music, you're talking music of the spheres. You're talking about vibrations passed through the ether or the astral fluid. Such was the theorizing then, and I think it stands to reason that Ernetti must have had a lot of really arcane, esoteric knowledge about sounds and very, very basic, primordial ways in which sound and sight were transmitted, as you were saying earlier.
Well, listen, even modern music, relatively modern music, will put you into an altered state of sorts. So it may well be that music that old.
Well, but maybe a much more profound state than we know of in our present-day society.
Exactly.
It's a little bit akin to these mantras that have been so fashionable for the last few decades. These mantras that you hear repeated were supposed to have come to fakirs and yogis who've been meditating in caves for years. These mantras were delivered straight to them from God, and who knows, but there's not some kind of huge truth in this.
Listen, I studied Buddhism. I studied Nichiren Soku Soka Buddhism, and in that you chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
I know, but yes,
and
yes.
it produces an altered state. So, I mean, there's a lot to go on here. In what way was Father Ernetti technical, or how did he get wrapped up with these physicists? In other words, when did it move, do you think, toward this chronovisor, this look back in time?
Well, Art, for sure he knew a lot about physics. Also, he had a degree in quantum physics, subatomic physics.
He did.
Yeah, and along with having this tremendous knowledge of music.
Okay, let me stop you there. That I don't understand. How does a priest, how does a Benedictine priest get in other words, usually physics and hard science and the priesthood, they just don't mesh.
Well, one might think so. I would tend to agree with you, except that there's no doubt that Ernetti had this degree and did do research.
I'm with you.
So what we're talking a very, very unusual man, and all the more a guy that you can't dismiss as some kind of flake. Whatever was going on, it's very hard to just dismiss him out of hand.
Oh, I'm not doing that.
No, I know that. I know that. But in generally speaking, that's what you come up against. That's what I came up against when I began to research this material. It's you're on the one hand you do want to dismiss him because of some of his assertions and his claims. On the other hand, you really can't. And what has happened recently, or I guess I'm sort of maybe kind of getting far away from your last question. What has happened?
No. Just let me add here that I've interviewed a lot of the world's best scientists, and I have no problem. I pin people down. That's what I do, and I will frequently ask a theoretical physicist or a physicist or a man of science, do you believe in the God of the Bible? It's an uncomfortable question. Most of them, when really pressed, you mean the exact God of... No, I don't. I mean, that's what comes from hard science, more times than not. And that's why I said what I said. So he's a priest and a physicist. My goodness. And anyway, so...
Well, you're talking to a real unusual man, that's for sure. And the one thing that's happened recently is that, first of all, there was Peter Cross's book in German, and then we translated Peter's book, made a lot of changes. We got a lot of new documentation, and those were the only books there were about Ernetti, except that a few years before Peter brought out his book, you mentioned this fellow earlier also, a French Jesuit priest named Francois Brune, who was a well-known journalist in France, even wrote a bestseller on paranormal phenomena at one point. Father Francois Brune, I think it was 1994, wrote a book in which he had a long section on Father Ernetti, and that was one of the first, books that sort of put Ernetti and his achievements before the general public, although there had been lots of rumors for years about this coronavirus.
Well, one quote from him was that, in his opinion, no matter what else, Father Ernetti would not have lied about this.
Yeah. The thing is that Father Francois Brune knew Ernetti well. He encountered him when Brune was very young. He was about 23 and had been doing postgraduate. He was French, but had been doing some graduate studies in Rome, and hitchhiked up to Venice to have a look at the basilicas and bumped into Ernetti, seemingly by chance. And
yes.
They talked. Ernetti told him his story, and Father Brune was, of course, totally. His mind was blown.
Why do you think Ernetti told him the story?
I don't know. Maybe he sensed something sympathetic in Brune. I don't know.
At this point, how old was Ernetti?
He was born in 1925. He would have been about 37.
About 37.
Yes, I think Brune was 15 years, maybe 10, 15 years younger.
So a relatively young man talking to a younger man and telling him, in essence, I guess, that he had built this machine with the help of other physicists. How long did it take in the doing? Do you know? We
don't know. I don't know anything about that, but two of the physicists that he claimed helped him were Werner von Braun, I guess it's more an engineer than a physicist, and Enrico Fermi. So already that sounds improbable already. I know that, and it sounded pretty improbable to Father Brune. But the thing is, Art, Father Brune over the years would go around and see Ernetti, and they would chat about all manner of things, and and always Francois Brune saw that Ernetti was a master of many fields of knowledge. He was interesting, informed things he had to say about about theology, about...
Well, do we know anything about the construction of the machine itself, how long it was in construction, anything of the nature of it at all? What do we know?
Yeah, we do.
All right.
Yeah, we do. Well, we know what Ernetti said anyway, and it was something you know the alley-oop comic strips. I think they're still around. The alley-oop is the caveman who's brought forward to our time by Dr. One Mug in a time machine.
Yeah.
But a lot of time we're seeing One Mug standing in a little booth looking into a TV screen and watching alley-oop, kind of cavorting several million years ago. And Ernetti, apparently, Ernetti's Chronovisor was more of an apparatus that enabled him to see back and hear back through time. Maybe looking something like a TV screen, something like earphones, but very complex, like a little bath escape.
This was a machine, though, that used an antenna in receiving light and sound that exist always, that once produced are always essentially there, and you can somehow tune into them, and that would include, I guess, anything from the present until the most distant past.
That seems to be what Ernetti claimed, yeah. We used to talk a lot in both the Akashic records and so forth, and today a lot of his talking about how it is rather quite possible, maybe even probable, that all sound waves, all light waves, kind of produced by us as we live, they are absorbed into the environment around us, and they're there to be accessed if we can figure out how to access them. And there's even a fairly well-known Nobel Prize-winning physicist, I think he's in France now, who was maybe born in Romania, who went to Greece and tried to access the memories of the columns of the Acropolis. And this is a very distinguished man, and I don't know how successful he was, but he tried to do this in some way. Could he kind of hear sounds, see things from ancient Greece?
All right. Do you know in what way these things were manifested? I mean, what year was it again that Father Ernetti claimed he did this?
Well, this is in the mid-50s that he claimed that he developed them. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was, gee whiz, television was a fledgling thing at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course, there was TV. It was certainly around, yeah. It just started, right.
Fledgling, yes. So I wonder if it involved any modern technology married with some technology perhaps very ancient.
Yes, apparently that's exactly what it was, although I don't know if exactly the appropriate word here. Some kind of a combination of quantum physics and astral fluid metaphysics, something he intimated these things. He kind of, dropped hints about the guy had a degree in physics. He did a lot of experimentation. And he had this very, very, really vast knowledge of very esoteric things having to do, starting with ancient music. He wrote about 100 books in his lifetime.
100 books, all right, but still, there must have been this moment, John, when Father Ernetti had perfected to the degree that he had the Chronovisor, and then he must have gone to the Vatican, and he must have started upstairs saying, look, I'm a priest, and I have invented a way to look at the past. What does the Vatican want me to do?
Well, likely he did something like that. The last maybe 10, 15 years of his life, he stopped talking about the Chronovisor. And Francois Brune, in his first book, and also in a new book that's come out, says he thinks that the Vatican told him to stop talking, and then told him not to tell people that the Vatican had told him to stop talking. But the thing is that one of the reasons why I got so interested is that you begin to think about, I'm sure you've thought about this for years, the implications of time travel.
Of course.
The power that it would bestow on the possessor, and how power...
Yeah, well, this is not. Yeah, but this is not exactly the H.G. Wells type machine where you actually physically go to the past. It is nevertheless a way of bringing the past or verifying the past.
Yes.
And so they went to look at the crucifixion of Christ, and reportedly got visual and sound reproduction of the crucifixion of Christ. Is that what you've heard?
I know how probable that sounds. Ernetti claimed to have gone, well, I guess not seen and heard back. I guess maybe we can put it that way, and to the crucifixion and seen Christ dying on the cross and taken a photo. And at some point, that photo sort of, he didn't release the photo himself. At some point, it kind of got out. The press got a hold of it.
Where is that photo?
It's we've reproduced it in our book.
What?
Yeah.
You reproduced the exact photo?
Yes, we did.
You have that photograph?
Sure. I should.
Oh, John.
I better add that after a while it seemed that this was a fraud. It was found that this photo of the face of Christ was a photo of a Christ on a wooden cross, carved on a wooden cross in a small church in central Italy. So it looked like fraud. And so Father Brun, Francois Brun, of course, who would see Ernetti periodically, put it to him and said, who couldn't believe that this very accomplished man would have to do something fraudulent, put it to him and said, what happened? And Ernetti had an explanation for it, a very kind of ingenuous explanation that Ernetti claimed that the I don't know if I get the details right. It's in our book. Ernetti claimed that the wooden statue, the carving, the artist who did it had been inspired by a nun who had mystical visions, and it had the mystical visions of the crucifixion of Christ. So Ernetti kind of said, well, his vision, what he carved was the result of inspiration because of a vision from somebody who herself also had the ability to go back and see.
He allegedly, nevertheless, photographed the crucifixion of Christ, but that wasn't all they allegedly did with it, is it?
He claimed to have gone a little farther back to Rome in 169 BC, as I think you read earlier, and to have watched a tragedy, a play that it's lost to antiquity, but we know of it. It's called Thyestes by a guy named Quintus Ennius, and Ernetti claimed to have, jotted down a bunch of the dialogue of this play, and to have come back or to have retrieved, using his chronovisor, a fragment of this play.
As proof, I guess, huh?
Yeah, and we were very fortunate. I made contact with Francois Brun while we were putting the book together, and he was good enough to send me the fragment, a copy of the fragment in Latin. Of course, we got a Princeton professor, PhD in classics, to translate it for us and to write commentary. That's in our book too. It's really extremely interesting.
Okay, and your book again is called Father Ernetti's Chronovisor: The Creation and Disappearance of the World's First Time Machine.
Mm-hmm.
I
don't know what to say. Also, I'd like to add one thing before I forget, and that is that he claimed at one point that they saw a little bit into the future, just far enough to see a bank robbery taking place.
That was going to be my next question. Could it go to the future?
Yeah, well, apparently he says that once they did look a little bit into the future, saw a bank robbery taking place, and were able to call the police in the present and have it prevented, which is kind of reminds you a bit of this new movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. That's the, and of course I didn't see all that movie, just part of it, but there you see that this ability that these police have to look a little bit into the future and arrest people for murder before they murder, that ability has corrupted the police force absolutely, and that power has corrupted them. And perhaps I think Francois Brun feels that perhaps the Vatican is holding something, maybe not the Chronovisor, but maybe the plans for it, because they're afraid people will be corrupted by it.
All right, that may well be, but let's, for a second, imagine the Vatican actually has a photograph of the crucifixion. Now, if they really have that, I guess I'm trying to imagine why they would suppress it, because it would give so many people religion. But the answer must be that in order to release that, they would have to release, I suppose, total information on how they got it, wouldn't they?
Well, and they also might be afraid that something like a chronovisor would prove that the the kind of standard Catholic, standard Catholic version of what took place was not quite true. I think they were maybe a little afraid that they've distorted, things have been distorted through the centuries, and yet they, of course, pass down, give us so much as black and white doctrine, dogma.
Okay, well, Father Ernetti warned that, and I'm quoting here, the machine can produce universal tragedy. What do you imagine he might have meant by that?
I think he really think he meant, Art, that bad guys could get a hold of such a machine and run the world and ruin the world. I think he meant that, and it seems to me that's a real probability. That's one of the things that makes this story, the Ernetti story, kind of, I wouldn't say convincing, but makes me think a lot about it.
Okay, well, so then the ability to look into the past or look into the future, surely that could easily be used, particularly a glance into the future, to affect world events, and that almost gets us to the big problem with all time travel.
And the past, maybe.
Well, if you were to even, you always worry about altering the past, but if you were to alter the future, there could be equally dire consequences, one might imagine, for doing such a thing, for changing the future.
Well, I think so. I'm no expert. I know we've been in touch with another German author named Ernest Meckelberg, who's done a number of books on time travel. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to translate any, but he once said to me something like, maybe some of the events that are taking place now have been kind of engineered from the future, that it wasn't supposed to be this way. And, the implications are...
Well, I just got a quick call from Richard C. Hoagland at the top of the hour, and he said, "Oh, my God, this is fascinating. Did you know that Wernher von Braun worked with the French allegedly worked with the French on anti-gravity?"
No, I didn't know that.
So if that's true, then it might not be so wild that if von Braun got information that there was something like this in the works, he might well have joined in. It may not be so wild.
No, we of course we researched this a lot, and as I said, we made a lot of changes, or rather we added a lot of new materials. So our book's significantly different from Peter's, which was a wonderful book anyway. But it seemed to us that Wernher von Braun just couldn't have been around at the time, or anywhere nearby at the time Ernetti was building the machine. But one doesn't know, of course, how much has changed and suppressed. Ernetti says that somebody else who helped him was Enrico Fermi, and he did know Enrico Fermi. We know that for sure. So it's a vast, mind-boggling mystery. Finally,
and you believe that the Vatican would imagine this to fall into the wrong hands?
I don't know what to believe, Art. I know that Francois Brune, he brought out a new book in February. In a French publisher, it's called in English "The Vatican's New Mystery," and he again covers this, this Ernetti territory that he covered first of all in '94 in another book, and he's read our book. Of course, I know him, excellent person, and he takes issue with some of the points that we raised. For example, our translator, our Princeton Classics professor, translator of the Ernetti fragment from the past.
Yes.
She thought that maybe this was not genuine, that Ernetti could have put it together, and she had offered certain little proofs, not proofs, but certain bits of evidence to suggest. She very mildly suggests that.
All right. Well, in other words, to say that Ernetti lied about all of this is what that would be saying.
Well, she suggested that.
But
very mildly.
Wait a minute here. We've got a priest. First of all, he's a priest, and I don't expect him to lie, but get past that. Then we've got a priest claiming that he's got this machine that can look into the past, or even the future for that matter, and a priest who is acquainted with quantum subatomic physics, a priest who has knowledge that most priests would never have in the hard sciences. And this doesn't sound like a joker of a man to me. It doesn't sound like a prankster of a man to me. Does it to you?
No, and what you've just said is really kind of exactly the position that Francois Brune takes in his latest book, vis-a-vis some of these really mild comments of our excellent translator. He says this is not so. This fragment of Latin is of course Ernetti was also a great scholar of Latin. And of course, all monks know Latin still, in Europe particularly. A great scholar of Latin, it could be argued that maybe he had the knowledge to put it together. But Father Brune says, who's also an excellent scholar in Latin, says, no, this is too complex, this piece, this fragment. Father Brune wouldn't have done it and couldn't have done it. It's too hard to do. So that's a lot of issues coming here. So what you just said is what Father Brune would have said vis-a-vis her remarks.
Now, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, a big part of Catholicism, every religion really, is faith. It's faith. Yeah. Now, I wonder if having actual proof of the crucifixion, even if it was exactly as we have read in the Bible, having real hardcore proof of that might remove that faith part. In some way, the Catholic Church would not want it removed.
That's a terrific point. I hadn't thought of that. That's a terrific point. What's the standard, the famous definition of faith? It has to do with things unseen and things unheard. And if you get proof or disproof have nothing to do with faith. And so if you have
it's belief in something you can't prove.
Right. So no, you're absolutely right in what you said.
So that would be something you suddenly could prove. And then there's the other possibility, and that is that they filmed or they got pictures of the crucifixion and somehow it was not as described in the Bible or in some way, a worrying way, different. Did they describe, other than the photograph, which you've already talked about, did they describe anything that would have clashed with what we know biblically?
Ernetti did describe to Brune, and we have it in our book, way back in 1962, what he saw, and it doesn't differ very much from the standard version of the Bible in the New Testament. Little bits and pieces here and there. Christ didn't say something that he's supposed to have said, and did say something that was not recorded. What Ernetti said about the crucifixion, just very small deviations. But again, you're looking at it's so complex, really. You're looking at a priest who's loyal to the Catholic Church, who has faith, and maybe there's a lot of things he's not going to say.
Is it also true that he claimed to have recovered the original text of the Ten Commandments given to Moses? I mean, you can imagine this Kodak moment, when Moses is holding the still smoldering tablets with the Ten Commandments on them. Is that essentially what they claimed?
Well, I think that's in Peter's book. We didn't put that. Sometimes when things seemed a bit improbable, we didn't put them in. Maybe we should have. Of course, there is so much to say about it. That's the thing. I think I did hear that, but that's not anything Ernetti dwells on. Mostly he talks about he talks about the crucifixion. He talks about this play that we don't have anymore. And
the bank robbery, the future.
Yeah, he talks about the bank robbery.
Now, here's an interesting question for you. If you were to be able to see a bank robbery that was going to occur, get to the police, prevent the bank robbery, you might, in that process, for example, prevent somebody from taking a bullet through the between the eyes, who otherwise would have taken a bullet. Now somebody is not dying, who, in the scheme of things, was supposed to die. People imagine only problems with changing the past, but I imagine the same problems inherent in changing the future. In other words, if somebody lives to produce offspring or become president or blow up the world or whatever the lesser thing they might do in their life, but they live instead of die, then you might have the same paradox problem you've got with travel to the past.
Oh, I would agree. I think that there's all kinds of... many people say there are all sorts of problems with time travel. Maybe it's possible, but there may be all sort of overwhelming and an overwhelmingly large number of reasons why we should never do it.
Which is again why, even if this man, who I'm leaning toward. I mean, here we've got a physicist who consulted with how many other physicists in the world?
Well, he claimed 12, and 12. We don't know very much about that really. You mentioned you read. Something from another article, Matos, the Portuguese, I'm not sure, another physicist, and we know he had something to do with him, but we don't know very much about that, really. And all of these people, these physicists denied, I think they all denied or not exactly denied ever having anything to do with the Chronovisor, but they sort of didn't reply to their messages and had gone on vacation when they were approached about this.
Gee,
so we don't know much about that.
Gee, that sounds just like my own government here.
Yeah.
When they hold news conferences and stuff.
Yeah, it's a vast story. The Russian press reported about 10, 15 years ago that there had been attempts to abduct Ernetti, certain foreign governments. There's an awful lot of rumors. And it's just, the more you get into it, on the one hand you keep wanting to dismiss it, on the other hand you cannot dismiss it. And Father Brune finally can't dismiss it. He says Ernetti was too fine a man, he was too smart a man, he was too accomplished. Why would he
make something of this scale up? Yeah, why would he?
Yeah, why would he?
And you say that in later years, the Vatican told him essentially to clam up.
That's what Father Brune thinks, although apparently when the Vatican tells a priest to clam up, they also tell the priest to clam up about having been told to clam up. So we don't have any kind of, nobody's saying, nobody will ever say, yes, that was the case.
Why not? Do you know whether they went back and they looked and tried to look at, I don't know, Adam and Eve, perhaps creation itself? I can think of a lot of things I'd want to look at with such a machine.
Yeah, I don't. He doesn't. There's not. As far as I know, he didn't mention that. Didn't mention that to Brune. He mentions having watched Cicero give an oration.
Wow.
And Ernetti even makes some comments on how Cicero's Latin was a little bit different than had been taught than priests had been taught it was when they went to seminaries in the 20th century. Also says he saw Mussolini give a speech. Heard Mussolini give a speech. So a few other things.
Wow.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much for coming on the air with me.